Hey, this is Clark with Pass the Baton, where it's all about a relay race, not a marathon. We want to pass it on. We want you to pass it on. We want you to pick it up and take it. I've been reading through the book of Mark, trying to in the mornings, and I got to chapter 4, and something was perplexing, I guess you would say. I just really hadn't noticed it. I've noticed part of it, but not all of it in the way that I did. And it's like when I was reading, I'm like, why would Jesus say that? And it sounds like that Jesus is saying, I don't want them to believe. I don't want them to understand. So let's look at it. In the book of Mark, Mark is scattered. It's not in chronological order, so you can't look at it that way. Mark was the one that was with Paul, with Barnabas, and Paul had contentions with Mark because he didn't come back. This is John Mark. And Barnabas, though, he said, no, I think he's still useful. Barnabas took him with him. And of course, we see that, yes, obviously he was useful. He wrote this book. So this is where Paul was wrong, in a sense. He didn't stick by Mark. He didn't encourage him. Later on, Paul does write about him and says, bring Mark with you because he's profitable to me for the ministry. So he does end up changing his mind, but I'm sure that Paul may have had second thoughts after, they left and after, because things were going on there that we don't see because we don't have everything written. Anyway, here's Mark. He's writing. Jesus is just giving him this parable of the soils, the sower and sows the seed in the soil. And the disciples and those that are with him are like, okay, so what does this mean? And then Jesus says this. He said unto them, he says, the 12. Now they asked him, and he said, unto you it is given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God, but unto them that are without, these are basically, he's saying these are secrets so that they won't understand. Now, I've kind of noticed that before because I thought, okay, parables were given so Rome wouldn't understand that Jesus and these disciples were talking about Christian things. So he kind of talks in a little bit of secret language, which I guess is possible. But then he says this, that seeing they may see and not perceive, and hearing they may hear and not understand, lest at any time they should be converted and their sins should be forgiven them. So right off the top, it sounds like Jesus is saying, I don't want them to understand. I don't want them to be converted. I don't want them to be forgiven. That's what it sounds like. But why would Jesus say that? So when you look at this, I really hadn't studied these particular verses before in this depth, but when you look at it, Jesus is quoting. He's quoting from the book of Isaiah, and this quote, hearing they may not hear and seeing they may not see, is probably the most quoted Old Testament passage in the Bible. It's Paul quotes it, the Gospels quote it. It's quoted in several different places and in different situations where they're quoting this. But in the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, starts out very familiar passage, very well known, where Isaiah sees the vision. And it's, holy, the seraphims are there, and they're saying, holy, holy, holy. And Isaiah's like, I'm a man of unclean lips. He says, who will go? And he says, send me. And that's where he answers the call. And so Jesus now, he says, now that I'm sending you, okay, so this is what I want you to say to them. So Isaiah is a prophet to Judah, which is the remaining two tribes. But over and over and over and over again, Judah has not listened. They've heard, but they've not listened. Jesus says God has been talking to them, but they've not obeyed. And so he's sending Isaiah as a prophet to Judah. And this is how he starts off, said, and this is ESV, he says, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. And it goes on. You can read through Isaiah chapter 6, but essentially God says to them, okay, I've been telling you over and over and over again. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you to the Babylonians. Babylonians are going to take over you. So in other words, I'm going to discipline you finally. You've not listened. So here's what's going to happen to you. So when Jesus is quoting from this, essentially this is what he is saying. Jesus is saying to them, okay, so I've been talking to you. I've been giving the gospel. I've been telling you exactly what, but you have not listened. You've not obeyed. So hearing you need to hear and seeing you need to see, and you've not been doing that. So because of that, I'm not to put it in a way that I've heard other people say as a quote, which whether it really means exactly that or not. But Jesus is saying, I'm not going to cast my pearls before the swine. You're not listening. You have to want to understand. And I've just said recently, and been talking to some other people, that apathy is a much bigger problem than atheism. People, they want, maybe they wanted to see Jesus because, and he said this at one point in the book of John, because he had fed all these people. It's like, well, I want food, so I'm going to hear it. But they didn't want really what Jesus wanted to give them. They didn't want that. They didn't want to do the work to actually understand, to get deep into it. And Jesus is this, he knows that. And so he starts talking in parables to the disciples, and to those that are without, he knows they're not going to understand it because they've had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity up to this point to listen, to understand, and they haven't. So let's look at this from a practical standpoint. Let's say that there's a bridge out ahead, and there's a sign there, and the sign says, bridge out ahead. Now, if someone cannot read, or may have a mental problem, or maybe they're physically blind, and so they don't understand that sign, and they keep going, we would say they're blind and they can't see. And by blind, we may mean that they're ignorant, meaning that in a sensible way, or they just don't understand, they're not smart enough, they can't read, so they're blind and they can't see. But someone who is of good mental faculty, and they see that sign and they read it and they're like, I don't care. It's probably just fake news, whatever they may be saying. So they just say, I'm going to go on ahead anyway. Well, they seen yet did not see. They saw it with their eyes. They may have seen it with their eyes, but they didn't care. They didn't understand. They seen yet did not see. The other person was blind and did not see, but they were seen and did not see. So they understood it, but they didn't adhere to it. And when Jesus is talking about this, I believe he's talking to people who understood it, but they didn't obey. They were just apathetic to it. They did not care. And so Jesus said, okay, so this is it. And it makes sense because he's giving the parable of the sower and the seed. So when he says some heard it and they took it, some heard it and just brushed it away, some of it fell on good soil, some of it on bad. So he's saying these people heard it, but they did not care. They did not want to, because I've told them time and time again, they were seeing yet did not see. And so Jesus, I think in this parable, he's basically saying, okay, I'm just going to deal with you disciples because you want to hear it. And that's something we really have to want to. I just heard that message this past week, by the way, but I think we cannot continue to be apathetic, and I see it in our churches, I see it in Christendom, if that's a word, I see it all over. People are just apathetic. They're nominal. They think they believe they're Christian because they were brought up that way, because they're Americans, but they're apathetic. They don't really care. And Jesus says, I'm going to deal with the people that care, the people that want to hear, that want to listen. And that is about what Jesus is talking about here with this parable. And I hope that you got something from it. I hope it makes you want to learn. If you're new to the channel, consider hitting the subscribe button. But until next time.